The New Style Golf VB Blast Wheel Foot Mount Conversion Kit consists of these parts. Now that you've disassembled your blast wheel and are getting ready to install your new Golf VB retrofit kit on your blast wheel, there's an adjustment that has to be made. Before you can begin installing anything onto your motor shaft, you must first measure from the back of the blast wheel housing to the end of your motor shaft. The distance should be 1 5/8 inches long. This will allow for proper clearance between your control cage, your impeller, and your centering plate. What I have done is clamped on a small piece of angle iron to the back of the blast wheel housing to use as a straight edge, so I can measure from the back of the housing to the end of the shaft. Again, I should have 1 5/8 inches. If not, I'm going to have to move the blast wheel housing. As I measure from the back of the housing to the end of the shaft, I have 2 1/8 inches, so I am going to move the housing. In order to move the housing, you must loosen up the 6 bolts that are holding the housing into place. After loosening them, you then slide the housing away from the motor so that you can achieve your 1 5/8 inches from the back of the housing to the end of the motor shaft. Now that your housing is loose, you can move it by using a hammer. You can tap it a little bit at a time until you achieve your 1 5/8 inch measurement. Now that you have achieved the 1 5/8 inch measurement from the back of the blast wheel housing to the end of the shaft, you can snug down the 6 bolts that hold the blast wheel housing into place. However, do not tighten them, as you will have to make some fine adjustments later. The first thing that you will install on your blast wheel is the hub seal. When you install your hub seal, make sure that this is the part of the hub seal that is towards the motor. And the way you do that is you insert the hub seal on the inside of your blast housing around the motor shaft and pull it through the back of the housing. It snaps into place. Sometimes it's not real easy to do, but once you get it snapped into place, it'll stay secure. Now that I have it snapped in all the way back, what I'm going to do is I'm going to apply some silicone around the outside edge here. That will ensure that it does not fall back into your housing during operation. Now that the hub seal is installed, the next step is to install the hub. That is attached to the motor shaft by a taper lock bushing. I install the taper lock bushing into the hub. Just set it in there. Start my Allen screws, set screws down in there. What you now do is you insert your hub along with your taper lock bushing through the top of your blast wheel housing and onto your motor shaft. Okay, slide your taper lock back onto the motor shaft, and you can use a screwdriver to line up your keyway. Before you insert your key into the motor shaft, make sure it's only approximately 1 3/4 inches long. If it's any longer than that, it's going to interfere with your centering plate when you go to assemble that part of the operation. Go ahead and slide your taper lock back onto the shaft approximately 5/8 of an inch. Now that you have your taper lock bushing set into place, 5/8 inches from the end of the shaft to the facing of your taper lock, you can snug up your set screws. Be careful as to not slide the taper lock on the motor shaft. The next thing that I do is I insert one of the blades into the wheel hub and secure it with a clamp. This will not allow the wheel hub to turn so that I can tighten down and torque the taper lock bushing. Now that I have the wheel hub secured, I torque the taper lock bushing to 40 foot-pounds. Now you install the rest of your blades. They're a dovetail design They slide right down into the bare wheel. You can feed them in through the top or in through the front, however you like to do it. After you install your last blade, then you install the centering plate. That keeps the blades in place. Install the centering plate in through the middle. Turn it until you feel it lock in. It locks in. It's secure. The blades now will not come out. They're in place also. The next thing that you'll want to do is to remove one of the studs that was being used to hold in your feed spout. Just remove that stud. Then remove this bottom bolt on the same side, okay? And what you're going to do is you're going to interchange them. No sense in tightening them all the way down, because what you're going to do is you're going to move your whole cage adapter. You're going to spin it. So you'll have to loosen up this one. And this bolt. And what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to turn this so that you have both of these studs now across from one another, because what they're going to do is they're going to hold on your spout retainer, the new spout retainer. It's going to go in there and it's going to hold your feed spout into place. When you align this back up, again, you want these going straight across, but you also want to center everything here. So after you get it all centered, then you want to snug everything down. The next thing that you do is install your control cage. Your control cage is what sets your blast pattern. On your control cage, you have an opening up on top. Now, when I install the control cage, I try and set the trailing edge of the opening, and the trailing edge is determined by the direction of your blast wheel motor. But I try and set the trailing edge of the opening 180 degrees from where you want your blast pattern to be. So in this case, the direction of my motor is that way, so I'm going to set this trailing edge right up here. Center up the control cage and tighten it down. Now that the control cage is in place and the wheel still moves freely, I install a clamp on one of the blades. This will secure the wheel from turning so that now I can install the impeller. When you install the impeller, make sure that these grooves here on the back of the impeller line up with the grooves on your centering plate. You install the Allen bolt with the special lock ring inside the impeller. And screw it right into the end of the motor shaft. Again, make sure that you're locked in. Now I torque my impeller to 35 foot-pounds. Now I check to make sure that everything is centered. If it's not centered, you may have to move your cage retaining ring to center things up. Spin your blast wheel. If your blast wheel moves freely, you can now secure down your blast wheel housing and your control cage. You can now install the hub seal covers on the back of the blast wheel housing. As you can see, I have applied a thin layer of silicone to the facing of the feed spout. That way when I put the feed spout seal on, it will ensure that it stays in place during assembly to the blast wheel. Now you install your feed spout and your feed spout retainer. Set your feed spout up in there into the centering. Insert your feed spout retainer. After you secure your feed spout retainer, you then can center up your feed spout and tighten in the bolt that holds the feed spout in place. Now that your feed spout's in place, you'll attach your feed spout to your abrasive valve assembly. You may have to loosen up the clamps on your hose to allow your abrasive valve assembly After you're finished attaching the feed spout to the abrasive valve assembly, you then can retighten your clamps. Now that you've successfully installed your new Goff VB style blast wheel conversion kit, all that you have left to do is reinstall your top curve liner, your end liners, and your blast wheel housing cover. Then after that's done, go ahead and set your blast pattern.